Hey everybody, it's Doug Green and I'm the publisher of Technology Resolar News, and I'm very pleased to have with me Brent Kirkwood of Contrivian. Brent, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So Contrivian has recently launched Contrivian Constellation, a multi-constellation platform that unifies Amazon Leo, Starlink into a single software-defined solution with one contact, data plan, and support model. Very interesting news. But first, tell me a little bit about Contrivian.
Sure. So Contrivian is a multimodal connectivity provider at our core. We combine fiber, broadband, wireless, and satellite services, bonding them together to create resiliency and performance. Our customers range from mid to large enterprise customers to public sector organizations, state and federal government, wide variety of mission critical applications from mining to healthcare to energy production, fire life safety, and all sorts of organizations that require and rely upon having great connectivity available.
So tell me a little bit about multi-constellation technology and terrestrial-grade resilience in LEO.
Sure thing. So the idea behind Contrivian Constellation really came from our roots as a fiber-based provider. So in most cases, when we're deploying fiber or terrestrial solutions for our mission critical application, we would always have diverse connections. Diversely routed fiber coming in through multiple entrances into a building, for example. Everybody's used to this. That's kind of the standard in the industry for when it really matters. But really, that hasn't been available in low Earth orbit until very recently. As we're starting to have multiple constellations available in low Earth orbit, we said we really need to have the same level of redundancy and resiliency that organizations are used to on the ground. The difference is that low Earth orbit access technologies work differently than fiber. The Starlink and Amazon, they've done a great job of making it relatively easy to connect to these services, but integrating them into enterprise networks requires a little more work. And they behave differently than terrestrial solutions. So we built software that actually understands low Earth orbit access and combines them together so that there's no more failover. You know, we're used to talking about things in terms of a primary connection and a secondary connection, but the reality is when you switch, traffic is disrupted, even for a short period of time. Might not be a big deal when you have fiber, but in low Earth orbit, where things are a little more dynamic, that can be a problem. And so we're trying to elevate the industry and move past that concept of failover and actually make it a unified, bonded, always-on solution that abstracts the users away from the underlying transport technologies.
Now, you have some real use cases in government and also enterprise, is that right?
That's right.
And yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So enterprise, I'll start there. So our customers are typically organizations that have lots of locations around the country or the world. Typically would be dealing with multiple telecom operators and wireless service providers and satellite providers. We're making that simple, giving them a single source for all of their connectivity, no matter where they are, and whatever modality is required at the location. So for example, we have a number of energy companies that produce electricity using renewable energy sources. If you think about wind farms or solar panels, though, they tend to be in the middle of nowhere where fiber isn't necessarily available. But getting the data in real time from those energy production facilities back to the grid operators is super important. And so we'll deploy a mix of technologies, satellite and wireless, so that the telemetry from those solar plants get back to the grid operators and those power facilities can stay online. On the public sector side, our customers range from a lot of state governments, in particular fire and life safety, where rapid deployment for connectivity is essential for life-saving missions. And then in the federal space, defense and intelligence require connectivity in hard to get to places. They require it fast, highly secure, and highly resilient for whatever the mission might be. So we're using the technology to deliver extremely performant, extremely resilient connectivity where it's needed, when it's needed, in minutes, not days or weeks.
Very interesting. So tell me a little bit about the LEO plus fiber LTG 5G broadband ecosystems. And the unified software driven.
Yeah, so each of these access modalities, they all work a little differently, right? We're used to having kind of ubiquitous internet access that we can run our software and applications over, but underlying that kind of access layer that we see as consumers, the access technologies themselves behave differently. And so what we do in the software is understand how LTE and 5G work, understand how low Earth orbit works, and of course traditional fiber and broadband services. And we make adjustments to how the traffic is routing in real time based on how those underlying technologies are performing. So our core technology is something that we call Lighthouse. Lighthouse, just like lighthouses help sailors avoid the rocks and crashing into land, we see the rocks as packet loss and latency, right? So the technology, we have beacons deployed throughout the world across the internet, and the appliances that we install behind those access technologies are using those beacons just like a lighthouse, just like a sailor would, and understand where the packet loss and latency is that are going to impact their performance. So we understand, there's thousands of providers in the world. Depending on who you talk to, upwards of 17,000 providers. They all have their nuances. They all have the things that make them a little bit different from each other. Yes, there are industry standards, but the underlying technology is different, especially with things like low Earth orbit. And so we build those nuances into the software so that we can route the packets, route the actual customer traffic in a way such that their performance and applications aren't affected by what's happening underneath.
So tell me about the long-term evolution of LEO in zero failure scenarios.
Yeah, so I think what we're really excited about is having multiple options in low Earth orbit. That hasn't been the case. A lot of people still think about satellite-based internet as very slow and very expensive. Low Earth orbit is very much changing the game. We've had obviously one dominant player now for a couple of years, and that's continuing to mature and get better and better. But ultimately, competition is good, but diversity is good, right? There are a lot of cases where these remote applications are now becoming reliant on low Earth orbit based access, not as a backup to terrestrial, but actually the primary. And so when you're reliant upon that for your primary means of communication, having diversity, both in space with different satellites, different constellations, but also the ground stations and the terrestrial segments that connect them back to the backbone is all super important, right? And so as more of these constellations start coming online, I think the industry is going to mature. I think the pricing differences between the different constellations will converge somewhat. The service packages and availability will converge. But there's also strengths and weaknesses that different constellations have. As an example, Amazon Leo being very tightly coupled into the AWS ecosystem is very useful for organizations running workloads in AWS. I think we're going to continue to see that evolve across all the constellations, and I think that's good for the industry at large.
Well, Grant, I really want to thank you for joining me today. This has been very interesting. Where can we learn more, and where can channel partners and MSPs learn more about how to connect up with you guys, understand the opportunity?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed the conversation, and lots of information at our website, Contrivian.com. Feel free to stop by and see what we're doing.
And I almost forgot to ask in our podcast, but let me put it in. What is the opportunity here for the channel partners and MSPs?
The opportunity for the channel partners here is to deliver the connectivity that's the lifeblood of every organization. As companies keep moving more and more workloads to the cloud, start becoming more and more reliant on AI, where it's pulling in data sources from the network from lots of different places. The underlying plumbing, the connectivity, it's just becoming absolutely essential. There was a saying once that software is the language of business. If software is the language, connectivity is the lifeblood, right? That's what makes that software happen. And so for channel partners here, every company needs this, and every organization is thinking about how to make it more performant and more resilient. Contrivian's the answer for them, and we'd love to work with channel partners who want to bring this technology to their customer base.
Well, with that, thank you very much indeed. Everyone check it out, Contrivian.com. Thank you very much indeed for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.